All right. Excuse me. Welcome to the A's Philosophy YouTube channel. I am A's Philosophy. And today we are going to be investigating some claims that have become somewhat popular in skeptical circles over the last couple years, I would say, the last few years. Specifically, this idea that well, here's the title of today's presentation, and I put together a little PowerPoint for us to use. So the title of today's presentation is "Were the Gospel Narratives Crafted by Mimicking Homer's Epic Poems?" So within skeptical thinking and arguments that are being raised these days, one of the things that many are trying to claim is that Jesus and Christianity are basically whole cloth fabricated narratives based on pre-existing mythologies or existing cultural influences from the Greeks or the Egyptians or the Persians or any number of things. You have the idea that Jesus was Mithras or basically a recapitulation of Mithras or Osiris. You have Zeitgeist out there or some sort of Zoroastrian recreation, any number of things. There's Joseph Atwill's Caesar's Messiah, which says that Jesus and all of Christianity were literally invented by several Roman empires in the late first century. We got Mike in the chat. Good to see you. Good to see you. In the late first century, Christianity was invented by some Roman emperors who wanted to subdue the Jews. This is the kind of stuff that's out there, folks. But some of it is more absurd than others. Today, we're going to be investigating specifically an idea that has arisen because of the work of one particular scholar named Professor Dennis MacDonald. And this individual, this person, has gained a lot of traction over the last few years by drawing apparent similarity, by apparently finding, according to him, similarities and parallels between the Gospels, specifically Mark. Well, Luke Acts he started out with Luke Acts, and then he kind of graduated to Mark and the rest of the Gospels. Similarities between them and Greek epic poems written by Homer, specifically the Iliad and the Odyssey. And the reason I take this time to do this is because this idea actually arose during a conversation that took place on my channel last week. This specific argument was put forward, and this Professor MacDonald had been on my radar for several years now, ever since he started making his claims. I didn't really talk about him because, first of all, there's a lot of other things I want to talk about, and he was never. But his thesis that the Gospels were created by mimicking Homer's epics was brought up on my channel in an open discussion by somebody. So I thought this would be a good time to look into this and analyze his claims and his arguments, and just to show you kind of how popular. You may not have heard about this, but just to show you kind of how popular. I wouldn't say popular, but this is an influential idea, believe it or not. A lot of people have been influenced by his arguments and ideas, and he's written several books on it, and they've gained some popularity. So just to give you a flavor, hold on, let me get out of here real fast. Let me fix this. Yeah. Oh, that is not correct. That is not what I wanted. Hold on, let me see if I can fix this. There we go. That's better. I know this is hard to read, but I'm just going to read it for you. This is Myth Vision, which is a pretty large skeptical YouTube channel that kind of attacks Christianity relentlessly. This is a video from 3 years ago. This video is from October 13th, 2021. It's called Inescapable Evidence. The Gospels Use Homer to Create Their Narratives. Dr. Dennis R. MacDonald. This video has 51,000 views. Okay, and here's Dennis MacDonald on the left. We have a famous mythicist named Richard Carrier in the center here, and here's Derek Lambert, the host of MythVision channel. Yeah, 3 years ago, they put out a video, inescapable evidence the Gospels use Homer to create their narratives. So that's one video. And then we have, here it is again. This is MythVision again. Solid evidence the New Testament is, solid evidence the New Testament is imitating Homer's Odyssey. MythVision podcast 10 months ago, June 5th, 2024. 28,000 views. And if you read the comments, all of them are just soaking it up. They're praising it. They're saying, wow, what a great revelation all of this is. They're talking about how it's really transformed their view of the Gospels. And, this is a channel where most of the people are going to be hostile to Christianity in the first place. So it's not surprising the comments would be saying these things. But it does go to show that some people are apparently being influenced by these ideas, not just a small number. So here's another channel called Nahoa Life, from a video from July 15th, 2023, 5.6K views. And here's Dennis MacDonald explaining his theory again. And this is kind of what we're going to focus on today. This is kind of where he lays out some of the evidence that he's putting forward. Let me make sure that I have audio here. I haven't done that yet. Today, this is kind of where he lays out some of the okay, that looks good. All right, hopefully it isn't too bad. All right, so he got a table here, and I know this is hard to read, so I'm just gonna kind of lay it out there. He's got a table here. He's conversing with the host of this channel, Nahoa Life, and he's got a table. On the left hand side of the table is Odyssey books 9 and 10. So you have Homer's Odyssey. And you have a list of events or things that happen in the Odyssey, in books 9 and 10 of the Odyssey. Odyssey is a volume. And then you have Mark, the Gospel of Mark, and it's the Mark chapter 5 verses 1 and 20. And supposedly, this is the passage where Jesus cures the Gerasene demoniac. Okay. Oops, excuse me. I did not mean to do that. Hold on one second here. Let me see if we get this back. Okay. This is so what Dennis R. MacDonald has put together a list of parallels between these two narratives in these two different works that show, apparently, Sherry Hatfield, so glad to see you, that the Mark basically was reading the Odyssey and crafted it in such a way that it very closely paralleled things that are happening in the Odyssey. And he did this on purpose in such a way that people would come away with the inescapable conclusion that this is what is taking place. In other words, Dennis, you can listen to the videos yourself. I'm not going to play them because I'm going to do my own analysis. You can go watch them yourself. But his actual claim is that Mark wanted people to recognize the parallels because Mark wanted to replace Homer's epics with his new Christian religion. So this is exactly what he's arguing. That sounds a little bit absurd, but the evidence that he's putting forward is the parallels themselves. And he says the parallels are so striking and so undeniable that really there's no other conclusion you can come to besides the fact that Mark at least did this. You can ask about his motives. But Mark really did copy the Odyssey, and he wants you to think that the gospel is the bigger and better and newer version of the Odyssey, and that's to replace the existing cultural influence with Christianity. And that's Mark's intention. So I'm not going to play that. You can go listen to the videos if you want and listen to his arguments. But what I am going to do for the remainder of this broadcast is I'm actually going to look at each and every single one of these parallels and see, does the evidence match up? Is this what Mark is doing? Is there strong evidence that Mark, for whatever reason, copied, imitated, plagiarized, or mimicked the Odyssey, Homer's Odyssey? in this particular passage. And he brings this up on several of these discussions. There are many videos of Dennis MacDonald out there. You can go look at them. But this is what he puts forward as kind of his strongest case. This is like where you really, he has a number of books he's written on this topic over the years. But a lot of it is very suspect and vague and dubious. But this is what he points to when he says this is where we know that what happened. We know that Mark is copying the Odyssey because of passages like this where the similarities are so striking that it simply can't be denied that this is what's happening. So what I'm going to do, what I did, is I put together a PowerPoint presentation, which we're going to look at. And I copied Dennis MacDonald's chart word for word. I didn't change anything. And what we're going to do, it's actually on 2 pages. So there were 17 parallels. If you go to that video, I just closed it out. Can I go back to that? Oh yeah, I can. Believe it or not, if you scroll through this video starting at about minute 30 and a half, and you look at this chart, what you'll find over the course of the discussion is the chart goes on for a little while. And there are 17 parallels in total. And I have copied his chart, and I have gone through the parallels one by one. I read the Odyssey in that part of the Odyssey, and I read Mark. And I'm going to analyze. I'm going to show you each and every single one of these parallels. This is probably going to be a long presentation, but I want people to see what is being said, what the arguments are, what the strongest evidence is, and whether there's any real support for what is being said here. So we have, the table is too big to fit on one page, but basically we have Odyssey book 9 and 10. We have the parallels going down. And then we have Mark 5, 1 to 2 in the supposed parallels. So I am actually there are 17 parallels in total. There are 17, and we are going to analyze every single one of them. We're going to take a look at every single one of them. And we're going to see whether these parallels hold up. Do they really show that Mark copied or imitated the Odyssey from Homer? So if you watch the Myth Vision YouTube channel, the video I showed, according to Dr. MacDonald, this is what he says. The criteria for establishment of literary mimesis. Okay, this is in the video. Dr. MacDonald in Myth Vision Podcast YouTube channel, episode titled "Solid Evidence: The New Testament is Imitating Homer's Odyssey," June 5th, 2024. Okay, there's a typo there. This did not take place in 20,204. It's 2024. Okay, I wouldn't be surprised if there are a number of typos in this presentation because I kind of slapped it together, but I should say 2024. So these are the criteria. So accessibility. And by the way, this is the scholarly term for this kind of practice called mimesis, because you are mimicking. One author is mimicking, but not necessarily directly copying the other guy. But the point is that people would recognize this and recognize, oh, this new guy is smart. This new text is bigger and better than the old one. We're switching over to so that's kind of what the idea is. This mimesis, it's called, based on the word mimicry. And when you want to establish that this is actually what's happening, there's a number of criteria that you have to go through that, according to him. Number one is accessibility. Was the original work accessible to everybody who would be reading the new work? So if people don't know about the old work, then who cares? They're not going to recognize the imitation. So analogy. Other authors target some mimetic model. Not really sure what's going on there. Density. So when you have a number of parallels in a very small area, in a very short time frame in terms of the work itself, and it's all kind of like looks similar to what's going on in the previous text, then that's the evidence of mimicry. It's kind of packed into a little condensed passage or section of the text. This is a big one. Order and sequence of the similarity. So as you're reading one text, the mimicked passages will kind of follow along with the original text. So the order and the sequence of the similarities is important because that's when you're supposed to recognize, hey, this event, there's a series of events And they both happen in the same order in both works, and they're both kind of like the same thing happening in order, going down. So the order and sequence of events is put forward as the strongest evidence that there is imitation or mimicry going, or mimesis going on here. You have unusual aspects of target literature best explained by mimicry. So like things that don't really make sense in the newer work, except if you're like, hey, why would this be here? Why would he write this? Oh, because he's mimicking that other text. So that's kind of the idea of that one. Interpretability, what is gained by asking if one text is a debtor to another? Basically, the idea that the mimicry actually explains something. It actually kind of gives you a reason for why what has been written the way it has. So it kind of elucidates why an author wrote something. It's because he wants to mimic another text. And ancient recognition. Readers within target culture recognize the imitation. So here's the problem. The scholarly community will say that the Gospels were written to a Gentile Greek audience. That's not necessarily the case. We have to realize that originally, according to Christianity, the original audience would have been the Jewish audience. And I'm not saying this in a derogatory manner, but it seems that this was a largely not highly educated population, not highly taught in the classics of Greek literature. Many of them probably were not even literate at all. So the idea that the target audience would have even recognized the imitation is highly suspect already. Now, the larger Greek and Hellenic community would have probably recognized the mimicry, but certainly not all the. I mean, you have the Christianity being spread in a number of places. How many people would recognize Mark basically imitating books 9 and 10 of the Odyssey in the healing of the Gerasene demoniac? It's already, we're starting to see questions about this. So, all right, but let's start with the similarities. Let's actually take a look at them and see what we can find out. So we got 17 of them. Let's see if we can plow through them in a timely manner before everyone dozes off. But I think this is really important because there's a lot of people who have been influenced by this. So it's worth doing a deep analysis and seeing what the potential is for this theory. All right, so here's the first similarity. We're looking at the parallels between the Gerasene demoniac in Mark chapter 5 verses 1 to 20, and also the Cyclops passage in the Odyssey, which occurs in books 9 and 10. So there's actually two sections of the Odyssey. It's books 9 and 10. The Cyclops is in book 9. And an encounter with the goddess Circe in book 10 are apparently what Mark is imitating. So similarity 1, Odysseus and his crew sailed. These are the similarities. If you go back to the table, I just want to show the table one more time. This is the table that Dennis MacDonald put forward, and I just copied it. So I'm not, and you can people can go investigate that themselves. I'm not changing anything. I'm just looking at the similarities he put forward, and I'm analyzing them one by one. You can go look at the table. Here's the table. So let's take a look at them. Similarity 1, Odysseus and his crew sailed to the land of the Cyclops and of Circe. And in Mark, Jesus and his disciples sailed to the land of Gerasene. Okay, so this is the first similarity. So the first similarity is that people are sailing around. People are sailing. Jesus is sailing. Odysseus. Okay, so first of all, the Odyssey is a Greek epic. In Greece, that's a nation of a bunch of islands. So sailing is going to be something that a lot of people do. It's going to be part of their cultural lore. So it's not surprising that in a Greek epic poem would be about sailing, or a bunch of people sailing around a bunch of places. Okay. And you have Jesus and his disciples also sailing. Okay, this is not all that spectacular. This isn't that special. The idea that, okay, Odysseus and his crew are sailing around. All right. Jesus and his crew, this is not this is not very strong evidence in my opinion. Just the fact, so the first similarity put forward by the professor is that the Odysseus was sailing and Jesus is sailing. So we have two passages. So this is not, in my opinion, this is not that strong. The idea that Jesus would sail somewhere is not evidence to me that Mark is imitating a Greek poem, where a lot of Greek poems going to be about sailing around because it's so many islands over there. So this isn't really that strong of an evidence, but again, this is just 1 point of 17, so maybe this will build on itself. But again, to even list this as a similarity is already, to me, striking me as a bit of a stretch. All right, similarity number 2. This is a little. It gets a little more interesting. On the mountain of the Cyclops. So remember, Odysseus is sailing around with his crew. They go to various places and they have various encounters with the various beings and monsters and gods and goddesses and stuff. In book 9, he comes to the land of the Cyclops, and he talks about how on the island of the Cyclops there are innumerable goats grazing. Okay, and then in Mark, I should have said on Mark down here. This is the second bullet point. Is what's on Mark. It says that on the mountain a large herd of swine graze. Okay, so this is apparently a similarity that Dennis MacDonald has put forward. We got New Genesis. Good to see you. So in the Cyclops, on the island Cyclops, there are innumerable goats grazing, and in the Mark, you have a talk about a number of swine. Now, what's interesting about this, I think that already, remember we talked about ordering. In the narrative about Mark, the swine come a little later in the narrative. It's not that long. It's only 20 verses in total. But right away, the goats come first in the Odyssey. So the order and sequencing is not lining up, in my opinion, right here. But we're gonna wait. Okay. So this is the passage from the Odyssey. I know this is a large block of text, and I know that's really boring, but I wanted to read it to you just to give you an idea of what we're looking at here. And this is from the Odyssey. We sailed hence, always in much distress, till we came to the land of the lawless and inhuman Cyclops. Now the Cyclops neither plant nor plow, but trust in providence, and live on such wheat, barley, and grapes as grow wild without any kind of tillage. And their wild grapes yield them wine as the sun and rain may grow them. They have no laws nor assemblies of the people, but live in caves on the tops of high mountains. Each is lord and master in his family, and they take no account of their neighbors. Now off their harbor there lies a wooded and fertile island, not quite close to the land of Cyclops, but still not far. It is overrun with wild goats that breed there in great numbers and are never disturbed by foot of man. For sportsmen, who as the rule will suffer so much hardship in forests or among mountain precipices, do not go there, nor yet again is it ever plowed or fed down. But it lies a wilderness, untilled and unsown from year to year, and has no living thing upon it but only goats. And we have here in red, it is overrun with wild goats that breed there in great numbers and are never disturbed by foot of man. So this is what's in the Odyssey about the goats. And notice, it's not actually the island of the Cyclops. It's another island that's kind of far off. But it's talking about these goats. So this is apparently, let's go, and I think oh yeah. If you read the Gospel of Mark, this is what it says about the goats. Now there was a large herd of swine feeding nearby on a mountain. So let me ask you, if Mark is mimicking the Odyssey, first of all, why does he change it from goats to swine? It's talking about a mountain, okay? It's not a separate island. Remember, this is the passage from the Odyssey. It's talking about innumerable goats that are breeding in great number on an island near the Cyclops. And we have one verse in Mark that talks about swine. So let me ask you, like, if Mark was imitating Homer, why didn't he just say it was a large herd of goats? Because that would have been way more obvious. And there's just one sentence about the swine. And you notice that in the Odyssey, it goes on and on about the island with the goats, with the goats on it. And in Mark, it's just kind of like almost, it's just one sentence about a large herd of swine. Doesn't say anything about the hunters or anything like that. So this is very strange. If Mark is trying to imitate the Odyssey, I'm not sure many people would pick up on this. So to me, this is the similarity too is kind of weak. Like, you have goats on an island near the Cyclops. Okay, that's interesting. And you have Mark, just one sentence about swine on a nearby mountain. So is this a similarity? I'm not seeing. I don't know. There's a big question. Again, Mark, if he's making things up, if he's just copying Homer, he could have just said they were goats. Why did he call them swine? It's really remarkable. This Mark 5:11, by the way, is the one sentence if you go read it. So to me, again, we're kind of striking out. That's strike two. I'm not seeing this as a very strong similarity personally. Similarity 3, according to Professor Dennis MacDonald, between the Gerasene Demoniac in Mark 5 and the Odyssey, books 9 and 10. Odysseus and his crew of 12 men disembarked. Jesus and his crew disembarked. Now, again, the similarity 1 was Odysseus is sailing around, and Jesus sails to the location of the Gerasene Demoniac. So if you're going to sail somewhere, guess what? You're going to have to get off wherever it is you're going. So the fact that Jesus and his crew disembarked, you have to disembark when you're sailing around. So this is not, again, and I think what Dennis MacDonald wants to do is he puts this in parentheses, of 12 chosen men. And you're supposed to, what you're supposed to do right there? You're supposed to go, wow, Odysseus had a crew of 12 men, just like Jesus had 12 apostles. Clearly, Mark is copying Homer here. Actually, no. Remember the 12 tribes of Israel? Jesus says the apostles represent the 12 tribes of Israel. The 12 tribes of Israel go way, way back before the time of the writing of the Gospels. So the fact that Odysseus has a crew of 12 men and Jesus has it, it's an interesting coincidence that in the Odyssey there are 12 men who go onto the island of the Cyclops with Odysseus. But it's really nothing more than that. See, I think this is almost disingenuous of Dennis MacDonald to do something like this, to put this as if this is some sort of obvious idea that Mark is copying the Odyssey. Oh, Odysseus has 12 men. Jesus has 12 apostles. Well, clearly, Mark is the Gospels are just copying Odysseus. Jesus has 12. Odysseus has 12. It's the same thing. Yeah, except, like I said, the 12 tribes of Israel goes way back before the Gospel written. This is history. Well, okay. Jill is saying here Odysseus did not have 12. He didn't have 12 disciples, right? But I guess the parallel would be that there were 12 companions, which the Odyssey does actually say that. So So I have the. So this is what it says right here. When we got to the land, which was not far, there on the face of the cliff near the sea, we saw a great cave overhung with laurels. It was a station for a great many sheep and goats, and outside there was a large yard with a high wall round it, made of stones built into the ground and of trees, both pine and oak. This was the abode of a huge monster who was then away from home shepherding his flocks. He would have nothing to do with other people, but led the life of an outlaw. He was a horrid creature, not like a human being at all, but resembling rather some crag that stands out boldly against the sky on top of a high mountain. I told my men to draw the ship ashore and stay where they were, all but the 12 best among them who were to go along with myself. So Odysseus has a crew of many men, and he's going to go take on the Cyclops. So to do that, he chooses his 12 best men. So this is in Odyssey Book 9. This is a direct excerpt from the Odyssey Book 9. So there's no denying that the Homer took 12 men, but to me, this can't be seen as a similarity because Jesus many times says that the 12 apostles are basically types of the 12 tribes of Israel. The 12 tribes of Israel goes way back before the writing of the Gospels. The number 12 has historic precedent within a Jewish context. So does Odysseus have 12 men who go with him to take on and fight the Cyclops? Yes, he does. Is that anything more than an interesting coincidence? No, it isn't. So it's interesting, but in my opinion, it's not very strong evidence. It's not a similarity because it's not mimesis, because we know that the 12 tribes of Israel go back hundreds of years before the writing of the Gospels, and that's clearly. Can you freaking read, sir? This is embarrassing. That says 12 ships. No, it says. Well, it's here. It says, I told my men to draw the ship ashore and stay where they were, all but the 12 best among them who were to go along with myself. So it is talking about the men. There are 12 men who are going to go with Odysseus to the Cyclops' home and challenge him. So yeah, it is 12 men. It's not 12 ships. It really is 12 men. But again, I don't think that matters. It's not a very strong similarity. It's Mark is not the number 12, the fact that it occurs in multiple pieces of literature is not a sign that one is copying the other. It is just a coincidence. There's nothing to it. There's the 12 tribes of Israel is a much better explanation than Odysseus having 12 men go with him. Yeah. So I'm going to move on from that. And this is what it says, Mark 5 and 3. They came to the other side of the sea into the country of the Gerasenes. When he, Jesus, got out of the boat, immediately a man from the tombs with an unclean spirit met him, and he had his dwelling among the tombs. So this is Mark 5, 1-3. So notice it doesn't even say anything about Jesus' crew. It doesn't say Jesus took his 12 apostles. I mean, it's obviously assumed that Jesus' apostles are with him. But notice in the Odyssey, right here, it talks about the crew members that were to go along with Odysseus. It talks about all this stuff. And I have found that there are 12 ships and 600 men. Right. But we're talking specifically about this passage in Book 9 of the Odyssey, where the similarity, Jill, is that Odysseus. It's specifically the passage where Odysseus arrives at the island of Cyclops. So it's not like all of the Odyssey. It's Mark is supposedly copying the part of the Odyssey where Odysseus takes on the Cyclops. So we have to be looking at that particular line of evidence. Yeah. So, but anyways, look, if you read the Gospel of Mark, it does not read anything like the passage in the Odyssey. It doesn't mention Jesus' crew. It doesn't even say there are 12 men with him. It doesn't say anything about anybody else. All it talks about is Jesus. So, this is not a very strong similarity again. Whereas similarity number 3 of 17, the text says he had 12 companions. Okay. Well, anyways, when I read Mark, I'm not seeing a similarity here. First, the Odyssey actually mentions 12 crew members. The account in Mark actually doesn't even mention anyone besides Jesus. So there's no similarity to be seen here. So we've gone through 3 of the 17 similarities, and we're seeing that they're all extremely weak so far. There's no literary connection between them. None. It's actually kind of striking that Professor Dennis MacDonald is hanging his academic reputation on this. All right, so we're going to move on to similarity number 4 of 17. They encountered a savage, lawless giant who lived in a cave. They encountered, in the Gospel of Mark, they encountered a savage, lawless demoniac who lived among caves. Now, we're going to see problems here as well. So this is Odyssey Book 9. So you have 1. They both use boats, and 2, not a parallel of all 12 ships are. Jill, I've already proven that the 12 is in reference to crew members. That is a fact. There is no dispute. In Book 9 of the Odyssey, it says Odysseus has 12 crew members who went to the home of the Cyclops with him. There's just no denying it. If you want to deny that, that's on you. But the facts are the facts. Similarity number 4. But again, as I've said, it doesn't matter. The similarity is not explained by mimesis. It's explained by Jewish cultural motifs. So it's just a coincidence, in my opinion. It's a pure coincidence that there's 12 crew members with Odysseus and 12 apostles with Jesus. So what was it? Number 4. Hold on. Number 4 is, they encountered a savage, lawless giant who lived in a cave. They encountered a savage, lawless demoniac who lived in a cave. All right. I'm going to help you out here, Dill. Where does it say 12 crew members? Can you show us that, please? Thanks. Yes, I will show you right now. I already showed you, but I'll show you again. So this right here, hold on. This right here, Jill, is a quote from the Odyssey, Book 9. If you go read the Book 9, I have copied and pasted it right here. This bottom sentence right here says the following. I told my men to draw the ship ashore and stay where they were, all but the 12 best among them who were to go along with myself. So it does act, and right here in red, it says all but the 12 best among them. So the 12 best men, the ship was drawn ashore, and then the 12 best men were to go with Odysseus to the home of the Cyclops. Yes, so this is 12 men, not ships. So we need to accept that. All right, moving on. I'm not going back to that. Jill, you can read it on your own. All right. Similarity number 4. There was the abode of a huge monster who was then away from home shepherding his flocks. He would have nothing to do with other people, but led the life of an outlaw. He was a horrid creature, not like a human being at all, but resembling rather some crag that stands out boldly against the sky on the top of a mountain. How do you know that it is speaking about the men, not the ship? Because if you read the rest of the narrative, it just becomes clear. Yeah. Even right there, it's clear. But if you keep on reading, there's 12 men with him. It's extremely clear. There's no denying it. I don't see why it matters, though. All right, so this is where, in similarity 4, and he's going to put this up against Mark 2:5. So we're going to read them. You got exposed, sir, to 12 ships. All right, Jill. You're a master of denying facts, so I'm not gonna argue. People can go read it on their own. It's clearly talking about 12 crew members. So if you don't want to believe that, good for you. When he got out of the tomb of the boat, this is my proof again. I found there are 12 ships and 600 men. So but that's not from the passage that Dennis MacDonald is putting forward. Where did you get that? Which book in the Odyssey did you get that from? Dennis MacDonald is saying the similarities occur in books 9 and 10 of the Odyssey. That is not from books 9 and 10 of the Odyssey. You're making a fool of yourself, Jill, which you do all the time. You're showing you don't have good reading comprehension, or you're not capable of following lines of evidence. I'm just trying to help you. When he got out, all right. So this is Mark. When he got out of the boat, immediately a man from the tombs with an unclean spirit met him, and he had his dwelling among the tombs. And no one was able to bind him anymore, even with a chain, because he had often been bound with shackles and chains. And the chains had been torn apart by him, and the shackles broken in pieces, and no one was strong enough to subdue him. Constantly, night and day, he was screaming among the tombs in the mountains and gnashing himself with stones. So let's talk about this right here. According to Dennis MacDonald, you have a savage, lawless giant who lives in a cave, and you have, in the gospel narratives, you have a savage, lawless demoniac who lives among caves. But notice very closely right here. In, hold on. In the Odyssey, it does actually say that he lived in a cave. But in the Gospel of Mark, it says that the demoniac lived among tombs. Okay, well, in those days, tombs were caves. But again, we have a problem. If Mark is imitating Homer, then why didn't he just say caves? He could have easily said caves instead of tombs. So even though tombs are technically caves, they are if Mark wants people to recognize that he is imitating Homer, why is he changing it so that it's not as recognizable? Remember, the whole point of Dennis MacDonald is that Mark wants people to know that he's mimicking the Odyssey so that the Gospels can replace the cultural influence of the Odysseys and become the new faith of the Mediterranean region. That's his entire thesis. So it's very strange that in this supposed similarity, the demoniac is living among tombs and not just straight up caves. But you know, and obviously there are other differences as well. I don't know. To me, this is also not a very strong similarity. You have a horrible non-human creature who's an outlaw, and you have a demoniac who is a human being who's, you know, kind of a madman living in tombs. So, two men in the Gospels, one is healed. Interpretation, context, the same with the Bible. Okay. So again, I think the similarity is not, it's not the strongest parallel, but it's also, it's something. I will say this is the first one where there's actually some connection. So we'll just keep that in our minds. All right, so here's similarity number 5, according to Dennis MacDonald. Polyphemus, which is actually the name of the Cyclops. I don't know why he doesn't call it the Cyclops here, but Polyphemus is the name of the Cyclops. Was usually depicted as nude. The demoniac was nude. Again, this is Dennis MacDonald's table. I've copied this. I did not change his words. Okay, so here's some facts. In fact, in the Odyssey, the Cyclops is not described as nude at any point. So we need to realize that. Ryan, you are letting Andy's opinions persuade you too much. Andy's the one in error. I guess you're assuming I agree with Andy, Ryan. You need to continue to watch the presentation. I am analyzing the claims. I am not agreeing with them necessarily. All right, so again, similarity number 5. Polyphemus, the Cyclops, is usually depicted as nude. Yeah, right. Yeah, Ryan. Just I'm not necessarily agreeing with Ryan. I'm analyzing the claims. I'm not saying they're correct at all. In fact, up to this point, we're up to similarity number 5 of 17 that has been put forward, and so far I've established that the first 4 were pretty terrible. I'm going through the list of evidence. Well, I'm not even really talking about Andy. Andy was someone who brought this idea up a few nights ago, but I'm talking about Professor Dennis MacDonald's idea that Mark copied the Odyssey. Polyphemus was usually depicted as nude. The demoniac was nude. Okay, so we have a huge problem here. Dennis MacDonald has put this forward as a similarity. But the problem is, in the Odyssey, if you read the entire account of the Cyclops, Polyphemus, at no point is the Cyclops described as nude. Okay? So there's no now you can say he was depicted as nude sometimes in the artwork or whatever. But again, this is literary mimesis. If the original artwork or text doesn't say he's nude, then you're not mimicking the text. The whole point is that Mark should be imitating the text. The text never says the Cyclops is nude. Never. Another fact is that in the Gospel of Mark, the demoniac is not described as nude at any point. So remember, Mark is supposed to be mimicking the Odyssey, the Odyssey of Homer. And Dennis MacDonald has put forward a similarity. The Cyclops was nude. The demoniac is nude in Mark. Both of those are false. They're just straight up false. The Cyclops is never described as nude. And in the Gospel of in the Gospel of Mark, the demoniac is never described as nude. And Dennis MacDonald is talking about the Gospel of Mark. He's not talking about the other Gospels. He says that the Gospel of Mark is the source material for the other Gospels. And Mark was the one who made up the story in the first place. Now I have here in parentheses Luke. That's because in the Gospel, is Professor MacDonald. It's Dennis MacDonald, first of all, and my guess is that he's an atheist. He's definitely not a Christian. In Luke, the demoniac is described as nude. Okay, but remember, Dennis MacDonald says that Mark was the one copying Homer. So if you read the Gospel of Mark, the demoniac is never described as nude. You only see that in the Gospel of Luke. But since Dennis MacDonald is saying that Mark is the one that made up the story, I'm sorry, this similarity does not stand because the Cyclops isn't nude and Mark isn't nude. So this is a terrible. Again, this borders on dishonesty. There are a lot of people who've listened to Dennis MacDonald's arguments, and he's putting them for. He's the one who's put this forward. He's lying to people when he says that this is a similarity. He's straight up. I don't know if he's lying, but he's definitely wrong. He definitely has wrong information that he's presenting people. It's incorrect, straight up incorrect. All right, similarity number 6 of 17. Circe recognized Odysseus and asked him not to harm her. Odysseus, swear me an oath not to plan another plot to hurt me. The giant asked Odysseus his name. Again, this is all from Dennis MacDonald. The demoniac recognized Jesus and asked him not to harm him. I adjure you by God, do not torment me. So the giant asked Odysseus his name. That's people ask each other the names all the time. Similarity, both have outside sources of new dude. Right, yeah, it's kind of silly that he would have put that forward, but he did. So we have to ask, what is his motives? Why he's getting something wrong for sure already. We're seeing that. The demoniac. So the giant asked Odysseus his name. This is. Is there? Let's read this. Oh yeah. So remember. I want people to remember that one of the ways you know that mimesis or mimicry or imitation is happening is the sequence of events. So we see right here this we're switching to book 10 of the Odyssey where Circe is mentioned, the goddess Circe. And the problem with this is that this is nowhere even close to the demoniac event. The sequence of events is supposed to be parallel. They're supposed to be parallel to one another. But Circe comes much, much later, after a number of other events have taken place. I'm going to show that to you. And apparently, all of this is supposed to be similar to the fact that demoniac recognized Jesus and asked him not to harm him. I adjure you by God, do not torment me. So let's read this. Note, Odysseus traveled to the island of King Aeolus for 1 month, and also to the land of Laestrygonians between Cyclops and Circe. So Dennis MacDonald doesn't bring this up. He doesn't tell people that a whole bunch of stuff happened between the Cyclops and Circe in the Odyssey. If you read the Odyssey, it's a long passage, and a bunch of things happen. There's the ordering and sequence of events is way out of whack. But remember, Dennis MacDonald himself said that ordering was one of the ways you knew imitation was taking place. So we're seeing more cracks in his story. So this is the order of events right here. All right, so first, when you get to the Cyclops, the first thing that happens from there, he lands at the island of the Cyclops. After he leaves the island of the Cyclops, he goes to the island of King Aeolus for 1 month. And this is in the if you read the Odyssey, this is what happens. After the island of King Aeolus, he stays there for 1 month and hangs out with him. He sails 9 days and 9 nights and gets blown off course. Then he returns to the island of King Aeolus, and King Aeolus gets really angry at him and banishes him. Then he sails 6 more days and nights. Then Odysseus arrives at the land of the Laestrygonians, gets ambushed, and a bunch of his men get killed. Then when they flee the land of the Laestrygonians, then he finally goes to the island of Circe. So this idea that these similarities and parallels are taking place in a sequence or an order that denotes imitation or mimesis is completely preposterous. All kinds of things are taking place out of order. But if you go listen to Dennis MacDonald, he says one of the strongest indications of mimesis or imitation is that the events take place in order of one another. So again, how does this fit in the ordering sequencing criterion for mimesis? It doesn't. Similarity number 6 sounds like it's getting closer and closer to Mark. Yeah, it's sad, but we're doing this because there are people who believe it, and this has been proven recently to me. So we're going to read the passage. When he came, he brought in with him a huge load of dry firewood to light the fire for his supper. This is the passage with Circe. And this he flung with such a noise on the floor of his... Oh, no, this is where the Cyclops asked Odysseus his name. When he came, he brought in with him a huge load of dry firewood to light the fire for his supper. And this he flung with such noise on the floor of his cave that we hid ourselves for fear at the far end of the cavern. When he had got through with all his work, he lit the fire, and then caught sight of us, whereon he said, "Strangers, who are you? Where do you sail from?" Typo. "Are you traders, or do you sail the sea as rovers with your hands against every man, and every man's hand against you?" Okay, so that's from the Odyssey, and that's supposed to be where... wait a minute, what was it? It's supposed to be where... oh yeah, the Cyclops asks Jesus not to harm... says, "Are you going to harm me?" Seeing Jesus, and then in Mark, seeing Jesus from a distance, he ran up and bowed down before him, and shouting with a loud voice, he said, "What business do we have with each other, Jesus, Son of the Most High God? I implore you by God, do not torment me." So you see that the passage is in red. This is what Dennis MacDonald is saying is parallel. So let's read it again. "Strangers, who are you? Where do you sail from? Are you traders, or do you sail the sea as rovers with your hands against every man, and every man's hand against you?" So that's the Odyssey. In Mark, who is supposed to be copying the Odyssey, it says, "I implore you by God, do not torment me." So is this a real parallel? Doesn't seem to be any sort of literary connection whatsoever. And if you go watch the video, this is the parallel. I have to say that because most people read it and say there's no parallel here. Exactly, there's no parallel. You actually have to squint your eyes to see any sort of parallel here. This is Dennis MacDonald. This is what he's arguing is the evidence. I'm going through one by one. I'm showing you there's nothing here, folks. There's nothing here. That's Mark 5, 6-7. Oh gosh, this is a large block of text. All right, this is the passage where Odysseus just basically defeats Circe. "But I rushed at her with my sword drawn as though I would kill her, whereupon she fell with a loud scream, clasped my knees, and spoke piteously, saying, 'Who and whence are you? From what place and people have you come? How can it be that my drugs have no power to charm you? Never yet was any man able to stand so much as a taste of the herb I gave you. You must be a spell-proof. Surely you can be none other than the bold hero Odysseus, who Hermes always said would come here someday with his ship while on his way home from Troy. So be it then. Sheathe your sword and let us go to bed, that we may make friends and learn to trust each other.' And I answered Odysseus, 'Circe, how can you expect me to be friendly with you when you have just been turning all my men into pigs? And now that you have got me here by myself, you mean me mischief when you ask me to go to bed with you and will unman me and make me fit for nothing. I shall certainly not consent to go to bed with you unless you will first take your solemn oath to plot no further harm to me.'" So this is in red here. First of all, this is pretty funny. So if you read the story, Circe's trying to turn Odysseus into a pig by giving him a magic potion or a swine or whatever. And I just think this is really funny. Odysseus knows this because he's been forewarned beforehand. By the way, spoilers. If you've never read the Odyssey, you're going to get a lot of spoilers today. Should have said that beforehand, but Odysseus knows this. He knows this is what she's going to do because someone warned him beforehand. This is what Circe does. So he came up with the plot. And he's like, "Circe, I'm not going to sleep with you unless you promise you're not going to hurt me." So she just literally tried to kill him. And now he's like, I'm not gonna sleep with you unless you promise. I want to say Circe must have been pretty hot to try to kill Odysseus like this, and him to be like, wait a minute, I'm not gonna go to bed with you unless you promise not to do that again. So he's already forgiven her. Really, it's really kind of funny. Anyways, I shall certainly not consent to go to bed with you unless you first take your solemn oath to plot no further harm against me. So that is supposed to parallel the demoniac saying, I implore you by God, do not torment me. So we're seeing a mix-up of the ordering. There's no ordering here. Odysseus is the one who says, do not plot to harm me again. That Odysseus is supposed to represent, or Jesus is supposed to represent Odysseus. But in the Mark, the demoniac is the one that said, do not hurt me. So again, we're seeing a lack of parallelism, a lack of structuring. There's not a matching connection here. It's all mixed up. The ordering's mixed up. And all the wording is off. There's no clear literary connection where it's just the parallels simply are not visible. They're not being established according to the criteria that Dennis MacDonald himself put forward, which we explained at the beginning of this presentation. 7 and 8. The giant asked Odysseus his name. Odysseus answered, no man is my name. Jesus asked the demoniac demoniac his name. The demoniac answered, Legion is my name. Okay, you have the Cyclops asking Odysseus his name. That's not quite very unusual. And Odysseus answered him. You have Jesus asking the demoniac his name, and the demoniac answered him. So the fact that people are asking each other their names is really, again, not surprising at all. Again, remember, in Mark, the demoniac is the one who answered the question. But in the Odyssey, the Cyclops is the one who asked the question. So again, we're seeing a mix-up. There's not a strong parallelism there. The figures and characters are all mixed up. It doesn't look like Mark is paralleling the Odyssey. It looks like they're just separate narratives with two people asking each other their names. So if this is literary mimesis, it's a very weak attempt. It's poorly planned and poorly plotted. You wouldn't recognize this, which is why Dennis MacDonald seems to be the only one who saw this for over 2,000 years. So again, pretty weak, in my opinion. And here it is in the Odyssey. He then took the cup and drank. He was so delighted with the taste of the wine that he begged me for another bowlful. Be so kind, he said, as to give me some more, and tell me your name at once. I want to make you a present that you will be glad to have. We have wine even in this country, for a soul grows grapes and sun ripens them. But this drinks like nectar and ambrosia all in one. I then gave him some more. 3 times did I fill the bowl for him, and 3 times did he drain it without thought or heed. Then, when I saw the wine had gotten to his head, I said to him as plausibly as I could, Cyclops, you ask me my name, and I will tell it to you. Give me, therefore, this present you promised me. My name is No Man. This is what my father and mother and my friends have always called me. So in the Odyssey, there's this long passage where the Cyclops is drinking Odysseus' wine, and it says, what's your name? And Odysseus eventually answers him. If you read the book of Gospel of Mark, this is what it says. For he had been saying to him, come out of the man, you unclean spirit. And he was asking him, what is your name? And he said to him, my name is Legion, for we are many. Okay, so does this really sound like a parallel between what is written here and what we just read in the Odyssey? Not really. We can see that if Mark is trying to mimic the Odyssey has a strong narrative prose, an elaborate poetic style to it. And in the Mark, it's just a straight up conversation that doesn't have any really literary embellishment at all. It's just Jesus asking the guy his name. And again, the characters are mixed up too between the Mark and the Odyssey. So very, very, very weak. Not at all a connection that one would make just by reading it. You really, it's again, we're seeing as we analyze these one by one, there's nothing here to be seen for the most part. Similarity number 9 of 17. Odysseus subdued the giant with violence and trickery. Circe's magic turned Odysseus' soldiers into swine. So Jesus subdued about 2,000 demons with divine power and sent them into swine and drove them in. So this is like the one parallel that maybe actually exists, is that in the passage about Circe, there were swine. Circe used magic to turn Odysseus' men into swine. And Jesus sends the demons into the swine, who then die. So there's swine. We're talking about swine here. I'm going to skip this one for time's sake because, first of all, it's a long passage in the Odyssey. I don't read everything. But if you go read it, it's pretty self-explanatory. Circe turned Odysseus' soldiers into swine by using magic. And then Jesus sent 2,000 demons into swine and drove them into the lake. So that's probably the strongest one we've seen so far. But we're going to keep moving here. 10 and 11. Polyphemus, remember Polyphemus is the name of the Cyclops, the giant. The shepherd called out to his neighbors. The Cyclops is the name of that race of beings, by the way. They're all called Cyclops. There's a number of them. 10 and 11. This is 10 and 11 put together. Polyphemus, the one Cyclops, the main one, called out to his neighbors. And then 11 is that the Cyclops came to the site to ask about Polyphemus's stolen sheep. Okay, keep that in mind. And in the Gospels, the swineherds called on their neighbors. The garrisons came to the site to ask about their swine. So pay very close attention to how Dennis MacDonald phrases this and words this. Is this really what happens? Let's take a look. All right. Oh, I'm going to read all this. When we ran away in fright, he plucked a beam all besmirched with gore from his eye and hurled it from him in a frenzy of rage and pain, shouting as he did so to the other Cyclops who lived on the bleak headlands near him. So they gathered from all quarters round his cave when they heard him crying and asked what was the matter with him. What ails you, Polyphemus, they said, that you make such a noise, breaking the stillness of the night and preventing us from being able to sleep? Surely no man is carrying off your sheep. Surely no man is trying to kill you either by fraud or force. But Polyphemus shouted to them from inside the cave, no man is killing me by fraud. No man is killing you by force. Then, said they, if no man is attacking you, you must be ill. When Zeus makes people ill, there is no help for it, and you had better pray to your father Poseidon. So we have here in red, okay, so here's the story of the other Cyclops coming to Polyphemus. And this is where Odysseus tricked him when he said, my name is no man. Because when the other Cyclops asked him, who's hurting you? Polyphemus remembered, nobody's hurting me. Nobody's hurting me. And then they're like, oh, okay, if no one's hurting you, we're just going to go away. You can pray to Poseidon if he wants to make you feel better. So it's kind of interesting how that happened. But the points in red are kind of the similarities we're looking at. So in red, shouting as he did to the other Cyclops is one similarity. And then again, surely no man is carrying off your sheep. So this is the similarities that are supposed to be represented in Mark. Oh yeah, it says then they went away. This is Mark 10, Mark 5, 11 to 15. Now there was a large herd of swine feeding nearby on the mountain. The demons implored him, saying, send us into the swine so that we may enter them. Jesus gave them permission, and coming out, the unclean spirits entered the swine, and the herd rushed down the steep bank into the sea, about 2,000 of them, and they were drowned in the sea. All right, so here's where the similarity supposedly begins. Their herdsmen ran away and reported it in the city and the country, and the people came to see what it was that had happened. They came to Jesus and observed the man who had been demon-possessed sitting down, clothed in his right mind, the very man who had the legion, and they became frightened. Okay, so let's note some things. It's not the other shepherds that are coming through. Math Pig, hold on one second. Good to see you. Now, when it says here, look down at 14 and 15 down here. The herdsmen ran away, and the people came. So it's not just shepherds. And also notice it never says that they came to check on the sheep. Now, if we go back to the passage in the Odyssey, which is right here, it specifically talks about the sheep. And this is what Dennis MacDonald brings up as the parallel. It says, surely no man is carrying off your sheep. Okay. Now is the similarity. But here, notice that no one is asking about the sheep. It's not a bunch of shepherds asking about sheep. There's no parallel to be seen here. It just says they came to see what had happened. Discussion tonight or proselytizing? Yeah, tonight is just going to be an analysis of it. There's not going to be time for a discussion. But there might be a discussion some other night. So I'm kind of trying to mix in discussions and kind of educational presentations. So there will be no discussion tonight. But at the end, people can ask questions if they want. There can be maybe a dialogue. We can get that going maybe about what was discussed today. So again, the parallel doesn't exist. The what was the parallel? First of all, let's go back and look. Neighbor. Oh yeah, the neighbors. The swineherd. The fresh. He called out to his neighbors. The Cyclops came to ask about the stolen sheep, and then the Gerasenes apparently came to ask about the swine. That's actually not what happened. The Gerasenes just came to see what had happened. They saw Jesus and became frightened. So again, am I free tomorrow at 10:30 p.m. UK? What's happening then? Are you having a discussion on your channel, Math Pig? All right, so 10 and 11 are down. There's nothing there. That's Mark 5, 11 and 15. We can see it's a very weak parallel, a very last thing, then I'll streak on. Okay, yeah. So Math Pig is having an event on his channel at 10:30 p.m. UK, which I think is 6:30 p.m. Eastern United States time, or it's either 6:30 or maybe 5:30 or somewhere in there. So check that out, y'all. All right, so 10 and 11 are down. And I said, no, nothing about the Gerasenes asking about Swine. And that was from Dennis MacDonald's presentation. So this is, again, I'll go live that time on Saturday. I've been looking to. Okay, if I am available, Math Pig, I will try. I can't say for sure that I'll be able to do that because I think tomorrow's going to be a pretty busy day for me. But I will, if I'm possibly can, I will attempt to join your chat at that time. Okay, so I will keep it in mind. I can't guarantee anything, but I will absolutely keep it in mind, and I appreciate the invitation very much. So thank you. I appreciate acknowledging me. Yeah, I'm glad to see you here for sure. All right, let's go to similarity number 12. Odysseus and his crew embarked to leave. Jesus and his crew embarked to leave. Okay, so again, we have people sailing around. They're arriving in places, and they're leaving. So again, this is not at all. This is just something that happened in the ancient world. That was one of the ways of getting around. Was people? It still is a way of getting around. You have people sailing around. But I guess this is so the idea that Jesus is sailing and Odysseus is sailing, not in my opinion meaningful whatsoever. So this is the passage in the Odyssey where it talks about them embarking. The crew rejoiced greatly. Similarity number 12. The crew rejoiced greatly at seeing those of us who had escaped death, but wept for the others whom the Cyclops had killed. However, I made signs to them by nodding and frowning that they were to hush their crying, and told them to get all the sheep on board at once and put out to sea. So they went aboard, took their places, and smote the gray sea with their oars. So that's the passage that in the Odyssey where Odysseus and his crew disembarked from the island of the Cyclops. When you go to Matthew, this is what it writes. And they began to implore him to leave their region. As he was getting in the boat, the man who had been demon-possessed was imploring him that he might accompany him. All right, so this is all it says. This is really the only thing. This is in Mark 5, 17, 18. Notice in the Odyssey, there's a long passage here about them getting in the ships. They're meeting together. They're getting together. He's talking about the crew, and they're beating the ocean with their oars. And then in Mark, there's none of this. First of all, 17 isn't even about them disembarking. That's just for context. So there's only one verse that could potentially be seen as a parallel. And it just says he was getting into the boat. It doesn't say anything about his crew. Yeah, no, nothing about Jesus' crew is ever mentioned. So how is this a literary parallel? This is terrible, terrible scholarship. Again, this is bordering on academic fraud, in my opinion. But remember, we saw at the beginning of the presentation that a lot of people are buying into this. Dennis MacDonald has made quite a name for himself and influenced thousands and thousands of people to accept. Remember, we were seeing videos where thousands of people were praising him for elucidating these strong connections. But as we see, as we go through one similarity after another, we're seeing that there's no literary mimesis or imitation going on here. They're hardly even parallels at all. Some of them are just straight up false. They don't even exist. We're going to keep moving because he had 17. So maybe 17 in totality will show something that each individually doesn't. Odysseus, I spelled that wrong. Odysseus told the giant to proclaim that he had blinded him. Jesus told the healed demoniac to proclaim what God had done. Okay, this is actually maybe something we can look at. But I would not listen to them, and I shouted out to him with my rage. This is the Odyssey. Cyclops, if anyone asks you who it was that put your eye out and spoiled your beauty, say it was the valiant warrior Odysseus, son of Laertes, who lives in Ithaca. Okay. In Mark 5:19, and he did not let him, but he said to him, go home to your people and report them to the great things the Lord has done for you and how he had mercy on you. So this is something of a parallel here. So Odysseus tells the Cyclops, tell it if anyone asks who put your eye out, it was Odysseus. Okay. Jesus says to the demoniac, if anyone asks you, who did this, tell them it was Jesus. Okay, so that is actually a parallel. I will say that it does. This is the first time where it looks like there's actually a strict parallel between the two texts. This is the only one out of 13 we finally hit one, but is it a coincidence? So let's keep looking at them and see what else. 14 of 17. The giant asked Odysseus, now aboard the ship, to come back. The demoniac asked Jesus, now aboard the ship, if he could be with him. Okay, so is this a parallel? Let's take a look at it. But I would not listen to this. This is what we just read, actually. Oh, wow, this is a lot again. But I would not listen to them and shouted out to him in my rage, Cyclops, if anyone asked you who it was that put your eye out and spoiled your beauty, say it was the valiant warrior Odysseus, son of Laertes, who lives in Ithaca. On this he groaned and cried out, alas, alas. Then the old prophecy about me is coming true. There was a prophet here at one time, a man both brave and of great stature, Telemus, son of Iramus, who was an excellent seer, and did all the prophesying for the Cyclops till he grew old. He told me that all this would happen to me someday and said I should lose my sight by the hand of Odysseus. I have been all along expecting someone of imposing presence and superhuman strength, whereas he turns out to be a little insignificant weakling who has managed to come blind my eye by taking advantage of me in my drink. Come here then, Odysseus, so that I may make you presents to show you my hospitality, and urge Poseidon to help you forward on your journey, for Poseidon and I are father and son. So here in red here at the bottom is the parallel that we just talked about. Come here then, Odysseus, that I may make you presents to show my hospitality. All right, so and also what should be noted here is Odysseus is actually already aboard the ship. That's going to be important. 14. So this is Mark 5:18 and 19. As Jesus, was getting into the boat, the man who had been demon-possessed was imploring him that he might accompany him, and he did not let him, but he said to him, go home to your people and report to them the great things the Lord has done for you and how he had mercy on you. Okay. So first of all, we notice that This was from the table of parallels that Dennis MacDonald offered in the presentation we saw. It says the demoniac asked Jesus who was now aboard the ship, if he could be with him. Notice, Jesus is not actually on board the ship, as Odysseus is. It says, as Jesus was getting into the boat. Again, if this is literary mimesis, if this is literary imitation, Mark is doing a terrible job. Because he could have easily said Jesus was already in the boat. And also look at all this that Homer writes about this passage. And there's this little line about the Cyclops saying, come back. And Dennis MacDonald wants to say that's the equivalent of the demoniac asking Jesus to come on the ship with Jesus. I mean, who is going to read this and make that connection? Especially, you have to be, first of all, an expert. You have to have basically memorized the Odyssey to even come close to recognizing something like that. And also remember, part of the argument is that Mark wants people to recognize the similarities so that the Gospels can replace the Odyssey or Homer as the dominant cultural influence. So Mark, he needs people to see the similarity. He needs people to see that his writing is superior to the inferior Homer and his Odyssey and Iliad and his poems. But who's going to recognize this? It's just the note 1, Jesus is not yet on the boat, but is getting into the boat. Note 2, in the Odyssey, first Odysseus tells the Cyclops to proclaim what had been done. Then Cyclops asks Odysseus to come back. In Mark, first the demoniac asks to be with Jesus. Then Jesus tells the demoniac to proclaim what had been done. So this is a little bit confusing. But what you have to basically note here is that, remember, Professor MacDonald said that ordering was part of how you know that literary imitation is taking place. So why does Mark switch the order from the Odyssey? It's silly. The order is mixed up. If you go read it closely, I know this is kind of confusing because it's wordy, but basically, when you read the Odyssey, first Odysseus tells Cyclops to proclaim what had been done to him. Then Cyclops asks to be with Odysseus or come back. But in the Gospel, it's switched around. First, the demoniac says, can he come with Jesus? Then Jesus says the demoniac should go proclaim what has been done. So the ordering is not there, as Dennis MacDonald says it is. So this is a problem for him. So there it is. The ordering and sequencing is not aligned. So this is another strike against Dennis MacDonald. Odysseus refused the request. Jesus refused the request. Okay, we're not going to spend too much time on that. It's pretty obvious. Come here then, Odysseus, that I may make you presents to show my hospitality, and urge Poseidon to help you forward on your journey. For Poseidon and I are father and son. Then I said, I wish I could be as sure as killing. Then I said, that's Odysseus speaking. I wish I could be as sure of killing you outright and sending you down to the house of Hades, as I am that it will take more than Poseidon. It will take more than Poseidon to cure that eye of yours. So that's what is the parallel in the Odyssey. As he was getting into the boat, the man who had been demon-possessed was imploring him that he might accompany him, and he did not let him. But he said to him, go home to your people and report to them what great things the Lord has done for you and how he had mercy on you. So look at the text in green. It's hard to see. It's supposed to be the parallel. Let's just read it again. I wish I could be as sure of killing you outright and sending you down to the house of Hades. It is supposed to be parallel with, and he did not let him. Is that a literary parallel? It's very hard to see. It's very hard to see. So again, we've gone through 15 parallels of 17, and I would say so far only one even comes close to anything resembling a strict parallel. Again, some of these are somewhat notable, but each individually is nothing on its own. It's nothing that you would look at and say is striking or convincing. Not this one either. It's the wording is different. The literary style is different. The ordering is all out of whack. There's no clear connection between these texts. It's terrible. All right, 16. We're at the penultimate similarity. Odysseus and his crew sailed away. All right, Jesus and his disciples sailed away. Okay, so they sailed to the island. They're sailing away from the island. Is that really surprising that this would happen? No. And I'm going to read this. Just it's wordy, but I'm going to read you how different the accounts are of the sailing away. Thus, through the livelong day to the going down of the sun, we feasted on we feasted our fill on meat and drink. But when the sun went down and it came on dark, we camped upon the beach. When the chill of morning, rosy-fingered dawn appeared, I bade my men on board and loosed the hawsers. They took their places and smote the grey sea with their oars. So we sailed on with sorrow in our hearts, but glad to escape death, though we had lost our comrades. And this is, okay, that's in the Odyssey. In Mark 21, it says, when Jesus had crossed over again in the boat to the other side, a large crowd gathered around him, and so he stayed by the seashore. So let's look at this. Mark is supposed to be replacing the Odyssey by mimicking it in a superior fashion. Now, I'm not saying Mark is bad. I'm just saying which seems to be of greater literary quality. The lengthy passage in the Odyssey where he spends like several sentences talking about them sailing from the island, or Mark where it really does not even mention them. It just says Jesus crossed over in the boat to the other side. If Mark is trying to parallel and replace the Odyssey, is this really going to get the job done? Does he really think he's doing a good job? Or does it make more sense that Mark is just trying to say what happened? It sounds to me like Mark is just reporting an event. He's not trying to engage in literary mimesis. He's not trying to say, hey, look at me. We're so much better than Homer. This wholly false narrative I'm crafting here is so much superior. No, it sounds like Mark is just reporting an event that happened. Is doing it in a very direct manner. Whereas you can tell the Odyssey, Homer's really trying to, jazz it up. He's talking about the crew sailing away from the island of the Cyclops after they had all died. Got Dirty Varmint here. Good to see you. Yeah, yeah, exactly. It's like when you read the Homer's Odyssey, it's like it literally is poetic. It's like it is a great. And I'm not trying to knock. Mark is not trying to create a literary work. He's clearly just he's trying to report an event that happened. He's not trying to engage in literary mimicry or one-upmanship or anything like that. If he's doing that, he's doing a very, very bad job. And why would he shame Christianity like that by trying to be superior to the Odyssey? And he can't even. This is nothing. The line in the Odyssey is way more literary, complex. It's just there's no comparison here. But Mark isn't trying to do that. I'm not insulting Mark. Mark isn't trying to create a literary masterpiece. He's just reporting on events that happened and that he knows about. So it shouldn't be seen as a knock against Mark that he's, he doesn't have a literary masterpiece here. And also to note, Jesus' crew and disciples are never mentioned, which they are in the original. So again, just if Mark's trying to mimic the Odyssey, he did a really terrible job. There's nothing to see here. So Dennis MacDonald, again, another strike against him. All right, so we have the last similarity. We have similarity number 17. Odysseus awoke during a tempest in the episode immediately following the story of the Cyclops. And then Jesus awoke during a tempest and calmed the wind and sea just before exercising the demoniac. So this is, again, I think you're going to see here, folks, that Professor McDonald is engaging in some deception. And I want to really show people what he did here, because this is not true. Again, I basically copied and pasted this from his own writing, his own work. I did not make these bullet points up myself. I copy and pasted them from Dennis MacDonald's work, essentially. And so right before the Gerasene demoniac is the passage where Jesus calms the wind and the sea. Okay. So we need to recognize this. So again, the ordering is not. Why didn't Mark put the awaking after the Gerasene demoniac? He could have easily done that if he's just making things up. If he wants people to recognize that, again, and remember at the beginning of the presentation, the ordering and sequencing was important to recognize mimicry. We're not seeing that here. But again, let's take a look at this. Let's take a deeper look at this, because this is important. Oh, this is long. We'll read it anyways. We're almost done. Thus they talked, and evil counsels prevailed. This is the Odyssey. They loosed the sack, whereupon the wind flew howling forth and raised a storm that carried us weeping out to sea and away from our own country. Then I awoke. There it is. He awoke. Then I awoke and knew not whether to throw myself into the sea or to live on and make the best of it. But I bore it, covered myself up, and lay down on the ship, while the men lamented bitterly as the fierce winds bore our fleet back to the Aeolian island. That's book 10. We're not even at book 9 anymore. We're at book 10 of the Odyssey, between the Cyclops and the goddess Circe. So here's Mark 4:37-39. And there arose a fierce gale of wind, and the waves were breaking over the boat, so much that the boat was already filling up. Jesus himself was in the stern, asleep on the cushion. And they woke him and said to him, Teacher, do you not care that we are perishing? And he got up and rebuked the wind and said to the sea, Hush, be still. And the wind died down, and it became perfectly calm. So that's Mark 4:37-39. Again, the ordering is out of sequence. We have the crew waking Jesus up. That did not occur in the Odyssey, book 10. Odysseus woke up by himself. We have the only things that are parallel are is that they have two people waking up in a storm. Everything else is completely different. Also, we look at the timeline of this. Remember the timeline, because I think Dennis MacDonald was making a huge case that ordering and sequencing is how you know it's mimicry. But let's look at the timeline. Remember that first Odysseus gets to the island of the Cyclops. Then he goes to the island of Aeolus for 1 month, an entire month. He spends an entire month there, and it talks about it, what he's doing there. He sails 9 days and 9 nights. And then after he sails 9 days and 9 nights, that's right at the end of the 9th night, that's when the Tempest occurs. So the Tempest occurs at that point. Then the Tempest sends them back to the island of King Aeolus, where he gets banished. Then they sail 6 days and 6 nights again. Then they arrive at the land of the Lystragonians and get ambushed, and a number of men get killed. Then they flee their lives and get to the island of Circe. So again, if ordering and sequencing is so important to the establishment that literary mimicry is taking place, Mark is doing a terrible, terrible job. Because in Mark, the awakening takes place. Then there is the Gerasene demoniac. In the Odyssey, the awakening during the Tempest is sandwiched in between the Cyclops and the island of Circe, which are supposed to be the two reference points. But they're also in between a bunch of other things that take place. It's not even part of the narrative of the Cyclops or of Circe's. A bunch of things take place in between. So I just want to make the case here that if ordering and sequencing is so much a part of Professor MacDonald's arguments, then there's nothing to see here, because the ordering and sequencing is all off. There's no ordering and sequencing. And we've seen this time and time again. But if you go watch videos of Dennis MacDonald, he says the strongest points of evidence are the ordering and the sequencing of these supposed parallels. But I think I've shown very clearly that time and time again, the ordering and the sequencing is just completely non-existent. It's as if Mark is not trying to order anything from a pre-existing story. It's like Mark is just telling a story that has nothing to do with another story. Now, are there similarities between them? Sort of, a couple. But certainly nothing that would rise to the level of undeniable evidence. So let's look at this, because that was the last parallel. again, we go down here, order of sequencing. Many events take place between leaving the island of the Cyclops and Odysseus, waking up in a Tempest. It is no longer a part of the narrative of the Cyclops. If you go read, I'm not asking you to read the Odyssey books 9 and 10, but if you go, it's a long, long literary work, and all kinds of things are taking place. Literally, each of these books could be their own like short story. And in Mark, it's like the entire Garrison Demoniac is 20 verses, and it's one continuous narrative. Okay, in the Odyssey, you have all these things happening. You have the Cyclops. You have the island of Aeolus. They're there for a month. They sail 9 days and 9 nights. There's a tempest. It blows them off course. They go back to the island of Aeolus. They get banished because he doesn't like them anymore. They sail 6 days and 6 more nights. Then they arrive at a completely different place, the Lycurgonians. The Lycurgonians attack them and kill a bunch of people, of his crew members. Then they flee from that island and go to the island of Circe, and she's turning people into swine. Okay? So, again, there's all kinds of things taking place in that. Mark in no way reflects any of that. It's ridiculous to think that Mark is trying to clearly, and I want to show you some of these YouTube videos, how dishonest they are, how incredibly dishonest they are. Here's Nahoa Life. I think that guy is actually a Christian, but I'm not sure. But his YouTube video is called "The Gospel According to Homer." Now, we just read through 17 similarities, which were pathetic. There was nothing to it. Nothing. It's sad. It's pathetic. But we have YouTube videos with thousands of views saying "The Gospel According to Homer." Discussion with Dr. Dennis MacDonald. We have Myth Vision. Inescapable evidence the Gospels use Homer to create their narratives. Dr. Dennis R. MacDonald. You see people, what we just read is all inescapable. There's no denying the facts. This has 51,000 views and all kinds of comments about how brilliant Dennis MacDonald is for his genius. He figured it out. He cracked the code. That's Myth Vision. And we have another Myth Vision. And there's I'm telling you, there's so many of these videos out there. It's not just Myth Vision. We have another Myth Vision. Solid evidence the New Testament is imitating Homer's Odyssey. 28,000 views. Thousands of likes. Hundreds of comments praising Dr. Dennis MacDonald for his genius. He's figured it out. He's proven that Mark copied, imitated, plagiarized Homer. And the Gospels are just fabricated stories that were created for cultural, rhetorical, literary purposes. They're not true events. This is so clear. This is what is being argued by this gentleman and the people who follow him and the people who promote him. But as I've just shown, I took a long time to go through each of the similarities in perhaps the strongest line of evidence that Dennis MacDonald has put forward. And I've shown that time and time again, he engages in what appears to be shoddy scholarship, creative imagination, and in my case, it borders on outright deception and lies. Good to see you, Freddie. Hope you're doing well. Yeah, I'm just trying to end Dr. Dennis MacDonald's career. What do you think? What do you think, Freddie? You think I'm going to do it? You think it's going to be the video where people are going to finally say, "Oh, Ace Philosophy, he did it. Time to stop paying attention to Dr. Dennis MacDonald and his fancy narratives, his fancy claims." That'd be nice. Probably not going to happen, but in my opinion, that's what I've accomplished. So I'm gonna roll with that. Conclusion. Based on the evidence analyzed and others, so I will be honest. Dennis MacDonald has written a number of books on this, and this is not the only line of evidence that he has presented. But if you watch videos of him, and there are many, some of them have hundreds of thousands of views. This particular passage in Mark that we've analyzed, and its relationship to the Odyssey book 9 and 10, is one he goes to regularly and says is the strongest line of evidence. So, based on the evidence analyzed, there is little to no justification for Professor MacDonald's claims. The parallels are weak and in some cases non-existent. question: if the parallels are so obvious, why did everyone miss them for 2,000 years? Remember, Dennis MacDonald just started writing his books a couple years ago about these parallels that are so obvious and so undeniable. Nobody in history seemed to have picked up on them before these. Based on your title, the dude is clueless and yeah. I'm trying to demonstrate that, Freddie. I'm trying to demonstrate how silly this kind of myth, the idea that the Gospels are replacement mythology. Dang it, shut up. Well, here's the thing, Andy. Now you get to see the grand finale. You get to see the conclusion of all of my analysis, okay? So you get to skip all of the boring analysis, and you get to see the real good stuff, all right? Now, if you want to see why I came to the conclusions I did, you're going to have to go back and watch the video, because I'm definitely not going to repeat everything I just said, because that would take another hour and a half. And I'm sure no one wants to do all that. But I highly recommend you do go watch the video, because you're going to watch the entire video after. Okay. Yeah, it's an hour and a half, which is kind of lengthy, but I think it'll be worth your time, because I think I do prove my conclusion here. What is my conclusion? Based on the evidence analyzed and others I invest, there is little to no justification of Professor MacDonald's claims. Parallels are weak and in some cases non-existent. If they're so obvious, a question arises: why did no one see them for 2,000 years? All right. So I'm just speculating here. I can't read anyone's mind or anyone's heart, but so I'm going to admit that. To me, it seems like Professor MacDonald is either caught up in his own theory, as in he probably saw something that he felt was significant. And sometimes when you do that and you feel like you're onto something and no one else has seen it, you get really wrapped up in your own ideas, and maybe you're seeing things that aren't really there. He could be trying to make a name for himself. Okay. You know, one thing a lot of scholars want to do, they have egos. They have reputations. They have scholarly, basically, yeah, reputations within their community. And they all want to be the newest guy on the block who figured things out, who is seen as makes his name in history as the guy who solved the riddle of Christianity or whatever it is they're studying. So I think Dennis MacDonald is trying to establish himself as the guy who figured out the Gospels, that they're just copying Homer, so that people will look back on him and say, hey, it was Dennis MacDonald who figured this out. I'd like to point out, though, that the differences are the important part of syncretic mimesis. The parallels are a byproduct. Also, the mimesis was noticed early on, from what I understand, and biblical teachers of the Byzantine Empire even used the passages from Homer's Odyssey to teach. Okay, well, that is okay. That would falsify what I'm saying right here, as part as no one noticed them. That is interesting. So if that is true, and it probably is true. I didn't know that, so I take that back. If no one noticed, if someone noticed them, then that is significant. But in my opinion, I didn't see that evidence presented. I kind of more analyzed the evidence itself. So that wasn't really kind of a line of argumentation that I used. I really did look at the evidence itself to see what it showed on its own merits. But I retract that. If it is true that other people have noticed them, then I should acknowledge that I'm wrong about that. So thank you for pointing that out. The claim about Byzantine teachers comes from Dennis. I haven't seen the evidence to support that claim to be. Well, maybe, I don't know everything that everyone said. So it's possible. It is possible that somewhere along the line, other people have noted these parallels. I haven't seen that, but again, I haven't seen all of the evidence. So if that is the case, okay, so be it. But really, it comes down to the evidence itself. And in my opinion, based on what I saw tonight, the evidence is weak, very weak. That's my opinion as well. So, and another thing is, I think I hate to go this route, but it could be It could be. I think Dennis MacDonald might be engaging a little bit of intentional deception here, because the parallels are so weak that the only reason you could think they're significant is if you have an agenda. I think it's possible. Again, I don't know this. I don't know this. I want to say that, but I think Dennis MacDonald might have an antipathy or hostility towards Christianity, and maybe he wants to present this as a scholarly attempt to refute Christianity when he knows that there is no real basis to it, or at least the case isn't as strong as he makes it out to be. He's trying to make it seem like this is a open and shut case. He does, but I think we saw tonight that that's not the case. So, I think he's being a little bit dishonest. I really do. I think he's being deceptive. I can't see that. I can't see into his heart, but it strikes me as being bordering on fraudulence and dishonesty. To me, it just gives the appearance of that. And I think his theory almost borders on absurd. I really do. I think the idea that when you read the Gospel of Mark and you really analyze it according to the evidence that's put forward, the claims that are made, I don't really see how people are taking this too seriously. That's my opinion. Maybe I'm biased because I think that the gospel narratives are pretty much historical. They may not be 100% inerrant in every detail, but I really do think that Mark is presenting history that he believes actually took place in space and time. So that is not something that's reconcilable with the idea that he crafted them as a literary mimicry or imitation. Okay, he didn't make these things up. He didn't fabricate them to replace Homer's Odyssey or his poems as a cultural influence. No, I think it's quite clear to me that Mark is just telling a narrative. Now you have things like, let's go back to the table. So let's go back to, hold on, let's go. Let's just go all the way back. Let's go back. Where is... so back to the table. Just review. So here's the table, all of everything. Oops. Yeah. Okay, there we go. So a number of these things just strike me straight up. Why would you even almost list them? So you have Odysseus and his crew sail to the land of the Cyclops. Okay, in Greek poems, you're going to have people sailing around because it's a bunch of islands. Nothing special. Jesus and his disciples sail to the land of the Gerasenes. All right, so what? They're sailing. Odysseus and his crew disembark. Okay, if you're sailing to a place, you're going to have to get off of the ship. And down here in 16, you have similarity 12. Odysseus and his crew embarked. Jesus and his crew embarked. And again, when we looked at these, it didn't even really say these things. These innocuous events don't even match up at all. And then Odysseus and his crew sailed away. Jesus and his disciples. So you have 17 similarities in the table that Dennis MacDonald created. 4 of them are just Jesus and sailing to a place and then leaving. And Odysseus doing the same thing. So if you have a story of people sailing, yeah, they're going to have to arrive at the place they're sailing, and they're going to have to leave the place that they're sailing. So 4 of the 17 are just Jesus sailing around. Now, is it inconceivable that Jesus could sail from one place to another? No. There are probably countless ancient stories about people sailing around. Are they copying each other? No, that's what people did back then. They sailed around. They still do it today. So just 4 of the 17 right off are just totally meaningless, pointless. Why would you even mention them? Many of the others, like similarity number 5, Polyphemus, the Cyclops, was depicted as nude. If you read the Odyssey, it never says the Cyclops was nude, ever, and it never says the demoniac was nude in Mark. So this parallel doesn't even exist. There's no literary connection. remember, another is that the ordering and sequencing is supposed to be a big part of all this. We saw time and time again that there was no ordering or sequencing. Everything was out of order. If Mark was really paralleling and he wanted people to notice that, there was no the order was all out of sorts. Things were happening completely out of order. Remember, and the two main stories that Dennis MacDonald is putting forward are the Cyclops and Circe. But if we go to and again, this is what Dennis MacDonald himself puts forward as the establishment for literary mimesis. This is his own words. This is what he says. Order and sequence of the similarities is his own basis for determining mimesis. If we go to if we go to this slide right here, this is the ordering of events in the Odyssey. And remember, it's supposed to be just the Cyclops and the Circe. But look at what happens. If you read the Odyssey in books 9 and 10, first you land at the island of Cyclops. Okay, there's that whole passage. It's long. Then, when they leave the Cyclops, they go to the island of King Aeolus. They spend 1 month there. Then, when they leave the island of King Aeolus, they sail for 9 days and 9 months, and they get blown off course. Then, they return to the island of King Aeolus, and they get banished again, because he doesn't like them anymore. Then, they sail 6 days and 6 nights. Then, they arrive at the land of the Lystragonians. There's an entire narrative about this entire other island of the Lystragonians, where a bunch of Odysseus' men get killed. Then, after all that, it's a long path. All this, literary description of what's going on, it's events, places, people, names. Then he finally arrives at the island. So, but all this is supposed to be. But in Mark, it's all one segment. There's one narrative. It's one story. It's all part of the same sequence of events. And even within that sequence of events, there are serious problems with the ordering. So, yeah, this is some terrible, terrible, horrible scholarship from Dennis MacDonald. The similarities aren't there. The ordering isn't there. The criteria are not there. His own criteria that he himself puts forward. Some of these are just made up, like the Cyclops being nude. It's not in there. It's not literary mimicry whatsoever. There's nothing to mimic. And there's and even in the copy story, it wasn't there either. So why is Dennis MacDonald putting that forward as a line of evidence? All of these. There was only one. I can't even remember which one it was that. Which one was it that was the strongest? I think it was Odysseus refused the request. Jesus refused. Yeah, there's only like one or two that even came close to being something that might be seen as a strong parallel. So there are 17 parallels that Dennis MacDonald put forward. I've analyzed every single one of them. I've found that it borders on absurdity. We get absurdity. We get weak connections, pathetic connections, and I think in some cases we almost get deception. We almost get outright fraud from. Well, let's go back to the beginning here. Oops. From current slide. No. Not what I wanted. Why? Hold on. Yeah, there we are. Okay. We're trying to get this in order. There we go. Finally got it. Just wanted to correct one thing about Polyphemus usually being depicted as nude. Polyphemus was indeed both described and painted as nude in pre-New Testament art. Maybe, you can say that, but the whole point is it's literary mimesis. So people can depict the Cyclops however they want. The point is Mark is supposed to be drawing parallels between the original literary work and the point is you're supposed to read the work and see the parallels. But a lot of people, how many ancient people from the Mediterranean region and the Near East would be aware of paintings of a naked Cyclops, and they would supposed to be making all these connections. You're talking about not all these people are literary scholars and experts and students. Most of these people are illiterate. They're not like studying classic paintings of the Cyclops in these temples and stuff. Yeah, I mean, he can make that argument all he wants, but the point is the parallels exist in the literary work. They don't. Now, it's not like I can see how you might argue that, well, people might have known that the Cyclops was supposed to be naked. Okay. Some of them might have, some of them might not have. Like, how are we supposed to know what these people were thinking? Like, the whole point is that Mark is presenting something that people are going to recognize as mimicry, as imitation, but as a superior version. No, because then then the theory, Andy, becomes unfalsifiable. So if anything is evidence of imitation, including not imitating the original work, then how can this theory be falsified? You can make up anything you want. Well, there are parallels between Homer and Mark. Oh, well, actually, this parallel doesn't exist. Well, it doesn't have to exist, because when you repurpose something, you leave things out. So what? So evident that the parallels themselves are evidence of mimicry, but also the lack of parallels is evidence of similarity. So how do you falsify this theory? This is the thing, Andy. When these scholars can make up anything they want, they can say that Mark is copying or imitating Homer, and then when you actually analyze the evidence, you say, "Well, no, there's no imitation here. There's these points don't line up." You can say, "Well, it doesn't have to line up. I mean, you can just be kind of, sort of similar, and might have been things people might have talked about and known about, but it doesn't have to be from the artwork, from the text itself." It's like, well, if the whole point is that you're establishing imitation, you should actually imitate the actual work. I think a better explanation, Andy, I think what I'm trying to get at here, a better explanation is that Mark wasn't imitating Homer. Mark is actually just writing his own narrative based on historical events. If Mark wanted to imitate Homer, he should have imitated Homer. He should have done a better job. He should have actually made it look like he was imitating Homer. It does not. There's no evidence that Mark was imitating Homer. For Mark to be imitating Homer, there has to be evidence of that. You can't say the lack of evidence is evidence. The parallels are supposed to exist as obvious and indisputable. Remember the videos we showed. Look, hold on. This is Myth Vision right here. Solid evidence the New Testament's imitating Homer's Odyssey. Inescapable evidence. The gospel used Homer to create their narrative. Inescapable evidence. This is not true. These skeptical channels are lying. I'm trying to show that. They are absolutely engaging in deception. I'm not saying Dennis MacDonald is engaging in deception. He probably fully believes what he's saying. But for them to use titles like this, that is deception. That is deception. We have Nahoa Life here. His channel. July 15th, 2023. The Gospel According to Homer. So you have these people out there. And again, these videos have thousands of views. 5,000 views is a number of views I would love to have on my channel. But Myth Vision, you have 28,000 and 58,000 views. I've seen videos with Dennis MacDonald that have over several hundred thousand views. And they use titles like this. They're all saying this stuff about how Dennis MacDonald proves Mark is copying Homer. No, he doesn't. No, he doesn't. Not even close. Because they aren't imitating the writings, they're imitating the overall influence that the write. Well, what's the evidence of that? They're not. It doesn't look like it's imitation. You have to actually have points of evidence that there's imitation going on. I'm just trying to explain how there's no actual evidence this is taking place. When you actually look at the supposed mimesis taking place, it doesn't exist. It's pure imagination. It's illusion. It's smoke and mirrors. I went through every single similarity that Dennis MacDonald put forward. There was only one that even came close. I mean, they were like vague similarities, but certainly not literary mimesis or imitation. It seems like you're expecting mimesis to be one-to-one copy of the original story or something. It's quite the opposite, typically speaking. The difference is... So, again, we go back to this idea of falsifiability. And on one hand, you have these similarities are the evidence. But on the other hand, if the stories are completely different and there's no similarities or parallels, that's also evidence. So how is this theory supposed to be falsified when people go and look at this and they say, well, these things aren't lining up? Now I want to go back. There's a slide here. It's very important. We look at the criterion for this is what Dennis MacDonald said. This is what he put forward as the criteria for establishment. Again, according to Dr. MacDonald, hold on one second. I want to correct this. This is a typo right here. It's just bothering me. It's bothering me. There we go. All right, let's get out of here. All right, now the correct date. Now the date is correct. Much better. According to Dr. MacDonald and Midvision Podcast YouTube channel, episode titled Solid Evidence the New Testament is Imitating Homer's Odyssey, June 5th, 2024. These are the criteria that he himself put forward. Where here does he say that differences are evidence of if you mimic something? Let's read this comment again. I think this is very interesting psychologically, because we're supposed to have literary mimicry, literary mimesis. When you mimic something, that means you do it the same way as the other people. Not at the exact same way, but you change little details, but you keep it similar enough that everything lines up. There's parallels. There's supposed to be parallels. And what we found out is the parallels in many cases either don't exist or they're not parallel to one another. So if the point is you have to have parallels of some sort. And what I've shown here is that the parallels really don't exist. There's no parallel. Okay? You have to actually have parallels. Yeah, there are stories of people sailing around in the ancient world meeting monsters. I bet you can find a Chinese story myth about that as well. I bet you can find a Native American myth about them finding a lawless creature or monster or person in their communities and like dealing with him in some way, some sort of heroic figure. There's heroic figures all over the place. All right. But the point is, I think that when you read the Gospel of Mark, it's not best explained by the argument that these YouTube channels are putting forward is that this is indisputable evidence that literary imitation is taking place. And you have these criteria right here in front of your face that establish, and you can go watch the video yourself because he explains all of these, what constitutes literary mimesis. And what I just went through, I just spent 2 hours going through every single similarity that Dennis MacDonald, and these do not arise. They are falsified one after another, except for 1 or 2 out of 17. None of these is present. Mimesis was everywhere, fine, but you have to establish that it's mimesis. You can't just say there's mimesis and say, well, everyone was mimicking everyone else, so that means... No, you have to actually prove that Mark was imitating Homer. That did not happen. Dennis MacDonald did not do that. He did not accomplish that. In fact, he failed quite miserably. Seems way too specific not to be imitation, and the alternative is even less... So you think imitation is a better explanation than Mark just relating events that he thinks took place? Okay, well, Andy, I'm going to recommend you watch the video. Watch my explanation, and I showed how point by point Dennis MacDonald's claims were very weak. They were stretches, to say the least. Some of them don't exist at all. Some of them were actually borderline deceptive. And you can't actually look at this and say that there's mimicry or imitation taking place. You can believe it, but you can't say it's indisputable. You can't say it's based on the evidence. You can't say it's based on any sort of objective criteria, literary criteria. You can't. You can just say you can say you believe it. You can say you think it, but you can't say it's demonstrable or provable in any way. You really can't. It's really no better of an explanation than saying I believe Mark. Even if you want to say Mark just made all this up, okay, that's a better explanation than Mark is copying Homer. That's a much better explanation. The argument is that Mark is imitating Homer. I would argue that that's the least likely explanation out of all of the other ones. The least likely. And if there's, again, you have if it's so undeniable, you have, I've never seen anyone in history that's pointing out these similarities. Okay, maybe it happened, but in any case, it didn't really hold fast. Not a lot of people noticed them. Very few in history. Over 2,000 years, we have maybe a few people who noticed it. No one really put much stock in it. All right, so let's go back. This is one question. You have, okay, where is it? You have biblical teachers of the Byzantine Empire. You have the Bible teachers. So if the Bible teachers know that Mark fabricated his stories based on Homer's Odyssey, why are they still Christians? Because to me, if I thought Mark was copying the Homer and that's how he created it, I would stop being a Christian. Because that means that there's no actual truth to the gospel, the claims of the gospel. It's all mythology. It's all fabricated. So I wouldn't be a Christian. You're saying that Christians knew that Mark plagiarized essentially Homer, and they taught this to their assemblies and congregations in the Byzantine Empire? That seems quite suspect to me. I'm not saying it didn't happen, but for me, if I found out for sure that Mark imitated Homer and that's how he crafted the gospel narratives, I'd be like, okay, Christianity's false. I'm not a Christian anymore. But thankfully, that didn't happen. I've looked at the evidence, and there's nothing to this, nothing whatsoever. And like I said in my conclusion, if you go back to that final slide, I really think it borders on absurdity. The alternative is believing that somebody cast the demons into a herd of swine. Keep that in mind. I understand it's absurd. I understand it's all absurd to you. I understand that there's no demons and there's no Jesus casting demons into swine. I recognize that. But okay, if you want to say that the gospel are just fake stories, that's okay. Go ahead and say that. If you want to say it's all just a legend, but the point is that it's a legend based on a previous legend, and that's supposed to undermine its reliability. No, it's not. I'm trying to show that the Mark did not imitate Homer. Mark did not imitate Homer, not even close. According to Dennis, the early readers of the Gospels were well aware that it was fictional. Really? Really? No, Andy. He might have said that. There is no way that Christianity could have spread the way it did if the earliest people who read the documents knew that it was fictional. Because you have to remember that skeptics want to deny us. A lot of people died for the Christian faith. Now, you can argue that they died for something that was false, but you're going to make the case that they died for something that they knew was false. They were literally enduring persecution. The fact that the Roman Empire persecuted Christians is not in dispute. A lot of Christians died. How many is disputable. But you're trying to make the case that people put their entire lives, even if they weren't being persecuted, They left their original faith that they really believed in for a new faith that they knew was fictional? Are you serious? Andy, come on. Let's be like real about this. That does not make sense. That's not how human nature works. Based on the timeline of early Christianity, Christianity must have spread very quickly because we have extra biblical historians talking about Christians and their existence in the late first century. Not even Christian historians. We have Roman historians talking about Christians existing in Rome in 66 AD in great enough numbers that they were being thought of as a problem. So that's the mid first century. People already saying Christianity has a stronghold in Rome, which is far from Judea and Israel. So it's not going to spread like that if there's no base. If people know that Christianity is fake, this is senseless. This is really senseless, Andy. Like, I'm not calling you senseless because I know you're smart and you're intelligent, but I think you have a real blind spot here. You're believing things that really don't make sense at a common sense level. Like, to maintain your skeptical position that you're putting forward right now, I really think you have to stretch the imagination of what's possible and what's realistic. I don't think your explanation is very sound at all. And I don't say that to insult you or your intelligence or anything. I'm just saying, to me, your perspective is far less realistic than people at Mark actually wrote the gospel. He believed it, even if it's ultimately false. And the people who read Mark's work also believed what Mark was saying was true history. That makes way more sense than what you're saying. Way more sense. It was a means to an end. They wanted freedom from Jewish oppression. It didn't need to be true. It just needed to hold its value as salvation from oppression. It was an era where dozens of rebellious Jewish groups were already trying to break free from the laws. So they copied Homer's epics. Really. So that's what they did. Instead of saying the Judaism's false, they just replaced it with another mythology that they knew was fake and led them to being persecuted heavily and dying in many cases and being fed to lions and stuff. And they knew it was all false. That's what you're going with. Wow. I don't know, Andy. I think you're going to have to think about this a little bit. I think you're going to have to think about this. I don't think that makes any sense at all. And again, I'm not trying to be insulting, but they evolved Judaism. I think what makes much more sense, this is just me, and we can talk about this, Andy. Again, I respect you, Andy. I'm not trying to hurt your feelings. I'm not trying to create. This isn't from a position of hostility. This is just me relating my perspective on what you're saying. It just makes a lot more sense to me that Jesus really existed. His apostles really existed. Okay, they wrote stories about Jesus. Maybe they mythologized him. If you want to say that the demons being casted into swine is something they did to kind of boost Jesus's reputation, okay. But ultimately, there were real people who really believed that Jesus was a real person, and they really did spread a real message, and people saw them and converted to this real religion that was real. I do believe Jesus exists. Yeah, the problem is you're saying that the stories that were crafted about him were being borrowed from pre-existing mythologies. So why does it make more sense just to not think that these people are writing things that they believe were truly accurate about the person that really existed? You're not, and you're going one step further than that. You're actually claiming that they knew that these narratives were literary fiction. That's not how human nature. I'm not going to convert to a religion. If someone came to me and said, "Hey, look at this work about Harry Potter. It's based on it's a fictional work based on the work of Jesus. I'm like, well, I'm converting to Harry Potterism right now, and if the government comes and persecutes me, yeah, I'm dying for that too. I'm not going to convert to something that I know is fake. Nobody's going to. It just doesn't make sense. Now, from an atheist see, I can kind of see from a skeptical perspective how it's all fake, and people are just converting from one fake system to another in your minds. But from the people within the religions, you have to understand these people really believe this. As ridiculous as that is to you, people aren't going to put their faith, as misplaced as it is, into something they know is fake. That is not how human nature works. So for Dennis MacDonald and you to both, well, this is something that Dennis MacDonald said. I heard him say this. He said that people knew this was mimicry, the mimesis. They knew this was literary imitation. No, that's not how human nature works. People aren't gonna invest their religion into something they know is mythology. That's just not something that people do. Maybe some people, like a small fringe of really weird people, but for something like Christianity to take off like it did in the ancient world, you have to have a lot of people really believing it. There really has to be some substantial basis for Christianity for it to spread the way it did. People aren't gonna grab onto something that they know is based on literary fiction. Okay? It just does not make sense. That is not a rational perspective to hold. It's not sensible. See, the thing about skeptics is they claim they establish themselves as the rationalists, but then they make arguments about this religion spreading like wildfire with people knowing that it's fake to begin with, and they think that that's what makes more sense than just writing history. And then you look at the evidence that it's mimicry, mimesis as it's called. You look at the evidence that it's imitation, it doesn't hold up. There's no evidence, which is what I demonstrated today in my presentation. So I'm going to leave it there, folks. I gave my analysis. I showed you why I think that these claims are so absurd. They border on ridiculous. They border on deception in many cases. I'm not saying that everyone who believes them is being deceptive, but it really is that bad, in my opinion. It really is that bad. The evidence put forward, the arguments, the scholarship, all of it is terrible. It's pathetic. That's my opinion. Now, again, I have my own biases, so I could be blind to the truth of this, but I really do think that when we look at this, when we analyze the claims, we analyze the evidence, what we see is that there is nothing to this. And anyone who believes this has accepted an inferior explanation of history very clearly to me. And we'd have to analyze their reasons for why they would believe something that's so clearly false, so clearly falsifiable, inaccurate, whatever you want to call it. But to me, that's what's going on. When I watch these YouTube videos, when I see these people making their case and all the thousands of people accepting it, claiming it's enlightening, claiming it's brilliant, claiming it's a valid explanation, it really saddens me. It makes me think about human psychology and why people can be... Now, I know the skeptics looked at Christianity and they think the same thing. How can people read Christianity and think it makes sense? But I just feel like that the arguments being put forward by the skeptics are easily falsifiable based on actual evidence that can be observed empirically, rationally analyzed, as opposed to the claims of religion, which are more based on faith. And I really do see the skeptics putting their faith in something that's false. So how are they different from the religious people they're claiming to be better than? It's the same thing. It's people choosing their preference, choosing what makes them comfortable, and going with it. The skeptics, the atheists, the secularists, they're just the same. They have emotional predispositions to what they believe as well. And that is leading them to accept these ridiculous claims by people like Dennis MacDonald. I'd like to prepare more for this conversation and talk about it further in the future. I think there's a way that we could find out who's okay. Absolutely, Andy. I think this. I agree. I think you're a reasonable person. I think you're wrong about this, but I think reasonable people can be wrong. And I know for a fact that I'm probably wrong about a lot of the stuff that I believe. So I have to acknowledge that even though I think you're very, very wrong about this, and it's very obvious to me that you're wrong, yeah, that's not a sign that someone is necessarily being totally unreasonable. But at the same time, it does raise questions to me that this could be something that's basically, again, I go back to the arguments that this is indisputable, that this isn't something that necessarily you've said, but that people like Professor McDonald were saying, and others like Myth Vision, Derek Lambert, others that I saw. It's not indisputable. It's not proof. There's no proof that the Gospels copied Homer's epics. So, yeah, is this grounds for a future conversation? Absolutely. I would like to discuss why it is that anyone would believe these things, because to me, it doesn't make sense. And I know to the skeptics, Christianity doesn't make sense. And actually, I will agree that modern Christianity does not make sense. But when you actually look at like the idea that Jesus existed, he had real apostles, the real apostles went to real places and spread Jesus' real message, and that's the basis of actual Christianity and how it spread, that makes way more sense than these mythicists, what these mythicists and mythologists are saying. Way more sense. But again, I'm willing to hear other people's arguments. But in the meantime, okay, we're well over 2 hours. I wanted to keep this below 2 hours, so I'm going to shut it down. For those of you who didn't catch the entire broadcast, please go back. Before you make a judgment, go back and look at my analysis and see what was said. Like and subscribe. We'll have so I plan on having other educational presentations like this one, mixed in with open discussions or one-on-one conversations for those who are interested. I've had a number of people challenge me to debates. I've said, okay, I'm willing to debate you. I'll come on camera. You can see how goofy looking I am, and we'll have fun with that. But I'm actually not. I'm being a little self-deprecating there. But I've said to some of these people, if you want to debate me, I'll debate you. Now, there's people who've reached out for conversations, but some of these big shots out there who claim I'm such a I'm so ridiculous in my arguments in my system. I've said I'll debate them to them directly, and they said okay, but they never reach out to me. I don't know what's going on there. I'm not going to name names right now, but some of these people have big followings, and they know who I am, and they said they're going to crush me like a bug. All right, they can come challenge me. Post a comment in my channel. Reach out to my email address. I'll give it to you. Nice chat with you. Glad to see you. Look, I'm going to watch the video. Have a wonderful night. All right. Thank you, Andy. All right. We're going to shut it down. Be looking for future videos. I'm very busy these days, so I don't have a lot of time to do things like this too often, but I wanted to do this. More open conversations. Might even get into debating if I have time. I would love to do. If I could clone myself and the other clone of me just dedicate himself to something, it would be like I would be like a YouTube. I'd be operating on YouTube. I'd just be making YouTube videos and debating all day. That's what I would really like to do. But I actually have a life and I have things to do. I'm very busy in my life outside of this. So unfortunately, I'm unable to do that. But I would love to just 24/7 just go at this and just try to build this movement. But it's just not in the cards right now. Maybe sometime in the future. But anyways, maybe at some point in the future. We'll see. Anyways, until next time, thank you and God bless. Until next time.